Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supreme human being, unto the Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Sringatam Swakata Krishna,
Sringatam Swakata Krishna,
Punya Shravana Kirtanaha,
Punya Shravana Kirtanaha,
Tasto Yabhadrani,
Vidyantasto Bhadrani,
Vedunoti Saritsatam,
Vedunoti Saritsatam.
Shri Krishna, the personality of God, who is the Paramatma, super soul, in everyone's heart, and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses desire from material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Nashtapreshu Bhadreshu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttamashloke,
Bhagavati Uttamashloke,
Bhagavati Naistiki,
Bhakti Naistiki.
By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome in life is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. We have a reading today from Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, chapter 5, called The Cause of All Causes, and we're on text 21. Kalam, Karma, Swabhavam, Kalam, Karma, Swabhavam, Mayasho, Mayaya, Swaya, Atman, Yadrichaya, Praptam, Atman Yadrichaya Praptam, Vibhushur, Upadade, Vibhushur, Upadade, Vibhushur. Kalam Karma Swabhavam Cha, Mayesho Mayaya Swaya, Atman Yadrichaya Praptam, Vibhushur Upadade, Kalam Karma Swabhavam Cha, Mayesho Mayaya Swaya, Atman Yadrichaya Praptam, Vibhushur Upadade, Kalam Karma Swabhavam Cha, Mayesho Mayaya Swaya, Atman Yadrichaya Praptam, Vibhushur Upadade.
Kalam Karma Swabhavam Cha, Mayesho Mayaya Swaya, Atmam Yadrichaya Praptam, Vibhushur Upadade,
Kalam Karma Swabhavam Cha, Mayesho Mayaya Swaya, Atman Yadrichaya Praptam, Vibhushur Upadade.
Vibhushur Upadade.
Kalam karma svabhavam cha.
Kalam karma sabhavam cha.
Mayesho mayaya swaya.
Mayeso yaya swaya.
Manya dvikshaya praptam.
Admanya jishaya.
Vibhusur upadade.
Vibhusho upadade. Kalam karma sabhavam cha. Mayesho mayaya swaya. Admanya jishaya pratam. Vibhusho upadade.
Kalam karma svabhavam cha.
Kalam karma sabhavam cha.
Mayesho mayaya swaya.
Mayesho yaya swaya.
Atmanya dvikshaya praptam.
Admanya jishaya pratam.
Vibhushur upadade.
Vibhusho upadade.
Kalam,
Kalam,
eternal time.
eternal time.
Karma,
Karma,
the fate of the living entity.
the fate of the living entity.
Swabhavam,
Svabhavam,
nature.
nature.
Cha,
Cha,
also.
also.
Maya,
Maya,
potency.
potency.
Ishaha,
Ishaha,
the controller.
the controller.
Mayaya,
Mayaya,
by the energy.
by the energy.
Swaya,
Swaya,
of his own.
of his own.
Atman,
Atman,
is parentheses, Atmani,
Atmani,
unto his self.
unto his self.
Yadrichaya,
Yadishaya,
independently.
independently.
Praptam,
Praptam,
being merged in.
being merged in.
Vibhushu,
Vibhushu,
appearing differently.
appearing differently.
Upadade,
Upadade,
accepted for being created again.
accepted for being created again.
Okay. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
The Lord, who is the controller of all energies, thus creates, by his own potency, eternal time, the fate of all living entities, in their particular nature for which they were created, and he again merges them independently. Please repeat. The Lord, who is the controller of all energies,
who is the controller of all energies,
thus creates,
by
his own potency, eternal time,
the fate of all living entities,
and their particular nature,
for which they were created.
and he again merges them independently. Purport. The creation of the material world, wherein the conditioned souls are allowed to act subordinately by the Supreme Lord, takes place again and again after being repeatedly annihilated. The material creation is something like a cloud in the unlimited sky. The real sky is the spiritual sky, eternally filled with the rays of the Brahmajyoti, and a portion of this unlimited sky is covered by the Mahatattva cloud of the material creation, in which the conditioned souls who want to lord it against the will of the Lord, small l, lord it against the will of the Lord with a capital L, they are put into play as they desire, under the control of the Lord by the agency of his external energy. As the rainy season appears and disappears regularly, the creation takes place and is again annihilated under the control of the Lord, as confirmed in the Bhagavad-Gita 8:19. So the creation and annihilation of the material world is just a regular action of the Lord, just to allow the conditioned souls to play as they like, and thereby create their own fate of being differently created again in terms of their independent desires at the time of annihilation. The creation, therefore, takes place at a historical date, parentheses, as we are accustomed to think of everything which has a beginning in our tiny experience, parentheses. The process of creation and annihilation is called anadi, or without reference to date regarding the time the creation first took place, because the duration of even a partial creation is 8,640,000,000 years. The law of creation is, however, as mentioned in the Vedic literatures, that it is again at certain intervals, that it is created at certain intervals and is again annihilated by the will of the Lord. The whole material or even the spiritual creation is a manifestation of the energy of the Lord, just as the light and heat of a fire are different manifestations of the fire's energy. The Lord therefore exists in his impersonal form by such expansion of energy, and the complete creation rests on his impersonal feature. Nonetheless, he keeps himself distinct from such creation as the pronoun or complete. And so no one should wrongly think that his personal feature is not existent due to his impersonal, unlimited expansion. The impersonal expansion is a manifestation of his energy, and he is always in his personal feature, despite his innumerable, unlimited expansions of impersonal energies. Bhagavatam 9:5-7. I'm going to go back over all this, so we'll get to it. For human intelligence, it is very difficult to conceive how the whole creation rests on his expansion of energy. But the Lord has given a very good example in the Bhagavad Gita. It is said that although the air and the atoms rest within the huge expansion of the sky, which is like the resting reservoir of everything materially created, still the sky remains separate and unaffected. Similarly, although the Supreme Lord maintains everything created by his expansion of energy, he always remains separate. This is accepted even by Sankaracharya. My good ass giving words. That's Shankaracharya, the great advocate of the impersonal form of the Absolute. He says Narayana Paravyakta, or Narayana exists separately, apart from the impersonal creative energy. The whole creation thus merges within the body of transcendental Narayan at the time of annihilation, and the creation emanates from his body again with the same unchanging categories of fate and individual nature. The individual living entities, being parts and parcels of the Lord, are sometimes described as Atma, qualitatively one in spiritual constitution. But because such living entities are actively attracted to the material creation, actively and subjectively, they are therefore different from the Lord. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master opened my eyes with the first light of knowledge, and opened my respectful basis unto him. So, my eyes go from good days to bad days. I don't know why. Right now they're acting weird. So, I'll just read over this again and talk about the parts.
Well, I can read for you if you want.
That's because I gotta keep stopping, so that's right. I can do it, thanks, so. It feels like it's teary or something. So, I'll just read through it again, but take it apart. It's a really difficult book for us. Try to read it because it's saying so many things again and again. The creation of the material world, wherein the conditioned souls are allowed to act subordinately by the Supreme Lord, takes place again and again after being repeatedly annihilated. So the material creation is something like a cloud in the unlimited sky. The real sky is the spiritual sky, eternally filled with the rays of the Brahma-jyoti. So we recently talked about this point, that the sky, the eternal sky, is everywhere and is filled by the rays of the Brahma-jyoti, which are impersonal in themselves, just like the inferior energy of the Lord. The inferior property of the Lord is impersonal. So the Brahma-jyoti is also impersonal. So the Brahma-jyoti becomes inferior property by the action of illusion, by Maya, apparently. Because I thought they were separate things, but it seemed like in a recent purport I saw that they weren't separate things. So the Brahma-jyoti is what everything is made out of. And it becomes dark due to Maya. So the Maya covering is over. And we can't see that everything is full of light. So we're given material eyes that can only see this covering. So in the sky, is like space. It's everything that the sky is there, no matter what's in it. It's again in the purport too. But if you have the sky and the air, and then you have an atomic bomb, and all of a sudden in the sky is full of like heat and light and dust particles and fierce wind forces and all this stuff, and fallout and radiation and everything. It's still the sky. The sky is unchanged. It still exists. It's still there. It's unchanged. But all the things in it, the air has changed. So even in space, it's sky. There was something I read on Facebook. They pop up different things, and it was something about, I think it was on Facebook. Anyway, something about the smell of outer space. By some sensor, they could smell it. The humans couldn't smell it. Of course, you try to smell it, you'd be sucked out into it or something. Because the atoms are so few and far between that there's almost a vacuum. But there is a smell of outer space, and it smells like burned rocks. That's what stars are, like burned rocks. It's rocks burning. They're not rock formed, but same elements, and they're burning. So outer space, if we were not endangered by the fact that it's almost a vacuum and we'd be sucked out into it and destroyed, it would smell like burned rocks. So it's still sky. It's all sky. And it has different things in it. Everything is in it. And so it's unchanged. It's just there. No matter what's in it or not in it, it's just there. It could be a near vacuum, or it could be air, it could be dust from a bomb, blown up from a bomb, radioactive dust. It could be clouds, whatever is in the sky, tornadoes, lightning, it's still the sky. So it's unchanged. So, the real sky is the spiritual sky, and a portion covered with the rays of the Brahma Jyoti, and a portion of this unlimited sky is covered by the Mahatattva cloud of the material creation, in which the conditioned souls who want to lord it against the will of the Lord are put into play as they desire under the control of the Lord by the agency of his external energy. It's kind of funny, but for some reason when I read that line, I pictured a sandbox. And kids, they have to play in the sand. They're restricted to the sandbox because they're naughty, so they can play there and they can do all kinds of all their, whatever they want to do, they can play in the sandbox. So it's a sandbox, and it's just called sand. So it's sort of, I don't know, somehow I had that image there. So we are put in this place to play. And we are actually eternal, beautiful, eternal spirit souls, but we don't want to go with the will of the Lord. So we get in this restricted place where there's sand and other kinds of stuff like that. So as the rainy season appears and disappears regularly, the creation takes place and is again annihilated under the control of the Lord. That's confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8:19. So I'll read that. Talk about something else I read. Again and again, when Brahma's day arrives, all of the entities come into being, and with the arrival of Brahma's night, they are helplessly annihilated. So there is a regular cycle on schedule. Everything is scheduled except our free will. Everything is scheduled. And the appearance of Krishna, this is what I read online. Somebody posted this and I saved it, but then I wanted to look at it last night, and for some reason when you save something on Facebook, it's still on Facebook, it still needs the internet, which wasn't connecting very well, so I couldn't look at it. But the basic idea was that in the Mahabharata, all of the astronomical configurations were noted for all the main events. And they can be studied and calculated, especially with great ease by our modern computers, so that there were like lots of particular eclipses that would have happened then. And they could calculate, okay, there were all these eclipses, and they can calculate what date those eclipses were. So the events of the Mahabharata can actually be dated. Krishna's birth, the beginning, the day the war began, all these things can actually, the day Krishna left, they can all be calculated. Dates, as we know them, can be calculated. 3000 whatever BC, which I can't remember, 3067 BC was something. I think that was Krishna's appearance, but I'm not sure if it might have been the war. But anyways, specific dates were given in this article, and they found them by calculating these astronomical things. And what you got?
No, astrological.
Yeah, astronomical. Yeah, astronomical. Well, I guess it doesn't matter. I mean, if you have the Vedic understanding, astronomical and astrological all the same. So, also just like, I have to finish that one thought, then go to the other one. That these things are so specific, and the Indologists, they're misnamed, they should be propagandists. That's what they should be called, India propagandists. So anti-India propagandists, because they created this whole pseudoscience that disproves, supposedly, all the Indian literatures. And they created this propaganda that, well, the Indians, for some reason, they just didn't have a sense of history. They wrote down their mythologies and stuff, and their philosophies, but they didn't record any history. And they recorded everything. They recorded everything. The dates can be calculated, everything that happened. And we have dates in our calendar for all these appearances down through the ages, way, way back, not just 5,000 years ago, but way back before that, because the dates are given in astronomical and astronomical terms. And so we can know. That's history. So that was a complete lie to discredit that the British didn't want to have to feel bad about conquering a superior civilization and destroying it. So they destroyed its credibility so that they wouldn't feel bad. And it's a really evil thing. And people still believe that, especially if you encounter Christians. They're really fed this lie. And it's really hard to explain anything because they're fed this lie that, oh, it's all mythology, it's been proven all mythology and everything. It's not as long ago as they say, all these things they say, which aren't true. And it's been terribly discredited, which is a really evil thing that was done. So, but with Prabhupada's books and with Prabhupada's disciples studying it and writing books, bringing this back and making it known that the dates can be known of these events. And they're given in a different term. They didn't say, March so-and-so, 3000 BC. They didn't say that because they didn't know about BC. They didn't have that. They just told about the astronomical things which can always be calculated for the dates. So they did certainly record history. So what was the other thing? Astrology. Okay. Astrology and astronomy are not really separate in in Vedic philosophy and Vedic science. They're not really separate things. Because the whole science says, well, okay, these stars have the planets, they have beings, and they have powers that can be measured in the sky and now can be understood how their effect is. It's all one science, really. I mean, maybe it might be different. Is it different science or not? They have astronomy and astrology, but they're so interconnected that they're not really separated. And it reminded me of something else I read on, saying that somebody was writing, there's no such thing in Vedic philosophy and Vedic science and civilization as separation of church and state. Mm-hmm. No such thing as that. That's a false idea, the separation of church and state. And we only need it because churches are false. It's the only reason we need it. And if the Vedic science and culture was active and undamaged, then the church, or the brahmanas and their teachings are guiding the king who does the right thing for everybody, makes them happy. And so you don't want it separated. And it wouldn't be separated. It's all one fabric. So this idea of separation of church and state is simply a defense against false churches. That's all it's good for. So, that was an interesting point to me. Anyways.
Can I respond to that? Can I say something?
Yeah.
But it's also that it's their idea of, like Prabhupada said, there's no way to really properly describe Dharma, and you can't compare it to religion. Dharma is the essence of the entity, sweetness is the essence of sugar. So, for us, our conditioning has been, in our lifetime, is that one day we set aside, and maybe one portion of one day we set aside for our worship. And then, there was other, depending on say if you're a Catholic or, you had certain holy days of obligation, other things like that. But generally speaking, we compartmentalize. This is my job, this is my religion, this is my pleasure, Whereas Sanatana Dharma, the Vedic culture, it's all, like you said, the fabric of the society. It's not compartmentalized. It's all the essence of our being, our existence. I mean, I hope I'm making sense. But
Yeah, well, completely. It's the same thing. It's you just elaborated further on it. The Sanatana Dharma, there's 4 religious principles. There's lots of rules and regulations to make you qualified to practice religion. We have religion now. We've taken that word and really kind of discredited it too, because really it shouldn't be different. These differences should not exist, and we should not need to make it a secular government because the religions are fighting with each other. All this stuff should not be there. It's a Kali Yuga thing, moral and hypocrisy, both. So I had a thread. I thought I did.
it's okay.
You
You
may
just
come
had
back.
surgery.
Yeah, it may come back. So no, that would happen anyways. I could blame it all on my eye surgery,
Yeah,
but then it would keep
go
going.
ahead, milk it for all it's worth. I said
It's
milk
the
it for
surgeon.
all
Milk
it's
it
worth.
for all it's worth.
Manjari Prabhu would say a senior moment.
The senior moment, yeah. Or an ADD moment, maybe my mind got distracted. I had a little bit of that in me. So anyways, I think I'll continue reading here and see what else comes back to my remembrance. This is still funny to do that. Okay, this was confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 8:19, which we just looked at it, that the cycle of creation and annihilation. And that's on schedule too. That's not what I just forgot, but there's another thing. That's on schedule also, that even creation and destruction of the universe is all on schedule. Everything's on schedule. And Krishna's pastimes is on schedule in different Earth planets, different universes. So it's all going on simultaneously, but each one's going on in a different universe, and they just follow each other like a train. And that's all on schedule. The only differences are just personality differences. Individual personalities have different free will, make different choices, and in different circumstances, different individuals making different free will choices. Krishna acts a little differently because of like that, and maybe likes a little variety, but the basic pastimes are scheduled, and so is the creation and annihilation. Everything is scheduled, everything is measurable, and here we are, we're thinking we're lost, everything's chaos and everything. That's only to us, because we are disobeying, and so we're getting different karma, and we don't like it. So everything is so controlled and so scheduled. Okay, so the creation and annihilation of the material world is a regular action of the Lord, just to allow the conditioned souls to play as they like, play in our sandbox, and thereby create their own fate and of being differently created. They create their own fate to be differently created, again, in terms of their independent desires at the time of annihilation. So whenever the creation is redone, we get the same thing that we left off with, our desires and our karma. The creation therefore takes place at a historical date, as we are accustomed to think of everything which has a beginning in our tiny experience. Now the next sentence seems like it either means because we habitually say it had no beginning because it's so long ago, or it's said because there's no first time creation happened, it's been going on forever. And there's creation, annihilation, there's no first time for that. But any time there's a creation, there's a date for it. So anyways, this is the next section. Takes place at a historical date, and we are accustomed to think. The process of creation and annihilation is called anadi, or without reference. Adi means beginning, anadi, not beginning. Without reference to date regarding the time the creation first took place, because the duration of even a partial creation is 8,640,000,000 years. So it looks like it's saying, it could be saying that there is no first time there was creation, or it could be that the creation first took place this time at some date so long ago they don't even attempt to say because it's just too long for us to understand anyway, so we habitually don't say. But it does have a date. The law of creation is, however, as mentioned in the Vedic literatures, that it is created at certain intervals and is again annihilated by the will of the Lord. The whole material or even the spiritual creation is a manifestation of the energy of the Lord, just as the light and heat of a fire are different manifestations of the fire's energy. So it's a little bit interesting because light and heat are not fire, but they're manifestations. So the Brahma Jyoti, and then the Mahatattva, and then all this variety of material life is all energy of the Lord. The Lord is, it's like the heat and light of it. It's the Brahma Jyoti, not the Lord himself. So some people want to say it's all the Lord himself. They want to be complete my body. So that's not the case. The Lord thereby exists in his impersonal form by such expansion of energy. He exists in his impersonal form by expansion of energy. And the complete creation rests on his impersonal feature. Of course, his impersonal feature is Brahma Jyoti. Nonetheless, he keeps himself distinct from such creation as the Purnam, or complete. And before I'm going to remember to go and read that verse of the Sri Upanishad. And so no one should wrongly think that his personal feature is not existent due to his impersonal unlimited expansions. And I just lost my place. When it jumps. Okay, it's not existent. I think it's not true. So there are the impersonalists, and really we were impersonalists as Christians because we believed that God had no form and he had to take a material body as Jesus in order to talk to us and save us. So they believed that somehow he came down and took a material body so he could have form. As if he was dependent on the material energy that he created in order to have any form. But still, we're created in his image and so on. They miss all that stuff. But they kind of believe that God has I don't know, I used to believe he has personal emotions, but otherwise no form. But then they questioned that because there were certain things in the Bible that made it seem like maybe he had a form. But anyway, it was pretty much impersonal. The idea that I picked up as a Christian was pretty much impersonal, and he had to become Jesus in order to be personal. Something like that. So anyways, not true. They believe his personal feature is not existent because there's so much impersonal energetic expansion, so much impersonal energy, and then this go to the light kind of idea that people have, go to the light, and then you merge with the light, I guess, and be happy forever. And ideas like this are impersonal ideas, and you can sense that there's a light. You can figure that out, that there must be some light in things, because there's energy, there's life, must be light. It's something you can sort of, it's confidential knowledge, but it's not more confidential or most confidential. You can kind of figure it out. It's broadly known, you can kind of figure it out. But it's not personal. So people see that, and they see that the energy of God is formed into material forms, and so they think, well, God must be, because they can't see him, spirit must be unformed, spirit must not have any form, it has to have matter to take form. And that's what people think nowadays. There has to be matter in order for spirit to take form. And that is not true. Spirit is just as much form, just as solid a form in the spiritual world, and when Krishna came in his own spiritual body, just as much spiritual form. He could fight the demons physically, just as physical as material, but it's spiritual. And it's not visible to our material eyes unless he wants to let us see him. So people think that because they can't see the personal, it must be impersonal. The impersonal manifestation is a manifestation of his energy, and he is always in his personal feature, despite his innumerable, unlimited expansions of impersonal energies. So that's Bhagavad Gita 9.5.7. Read that. And yet, everything that is created does not rest in me. And before that, he said, by me, in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. And yet, everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not a part of this cosmic manifestation, for my self is the very source of creation. It's like saying Achintya Veda Veda Tattva in other kinds of words. It's the same thing. Simultaneously, one and different, simultaneously in and not in. Okay. For human intelligence, it is very difficult to conceive how the whole creation rests on his expansion of energy. But the Lord has given a very good example in the Bhagavad Gita. So there we go about the sky again. It is said that although the air and the atoms rest within the huge expansion of the sky, which is like the resting reservoir of everything materially created, still the sky remains separate and unaffected. Similarly, although the Supreme Lord maintains everything created by his expansion of energy, he always remains separate. This is accepted even by Shankaracharya, the great advocate of the impersonal form of the Absolute. He says, Narayana Paro Vyakta, or Narayana exists separately, apart from the impersonal creative energy. The whole creation thus merges within the body of Transcendental Narayan at the time of annihilation, and the creation emanates from his body again to the same unchanging categories of fate and individual nature. So no matter how long we're merged in the body of Lord Narayan, we come out same individuals, same desires, just where we left off. Same karma. The individual living entities being parts and parcels of the Lord are sometimes described as Atma. Apparently the word Atma means qualitatively one in spiritual constitution. So that might mean maybe Jiva has a slightly different name. So we use Atma and Jiva interchangeably because we don't know the subtle difference of the meaning, but they refer both of them to the soul. But because such living entities are apt to be attracted to the material creation, actively and subjectively, they are themselves different from the Lord. So we both end up coming here and we both end up desiring to come here and wanting it. So it's actively and subjectively. So they are therefore different from the Lord. So we're made of the same material, yet we are marginal because we might just go the other way. No choice. So, I want to read the first verse of the Sri Shivansha, the invocation. Okay. Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnam Mudapchate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnam Eva Vashishita. So the personality of Godhead is perfect and complete. And because he is completely perfect, all emanations from him, such as this phenomenal world, are perfectly equipped as complete wholes. Whatever is produced of the complete whole is also complete in itself. Because he is the complete whole, even though so many complete units emanate from him, he remains the complete balance. Amazing. Just like Achintya Veda Veda Tattva, it's an amazing thing that Krishna can expand himself unlimitedly. He is always the complete whole, and no matter how many complete wholes he expands out of himself, he remains the complete whole, and they're also complete wholes. Like the candle, but that's not usually used for the Vishnu forms, that you have an original candle that lights all the other candles, and they're all candles burning. The same power, but one of them was the original one. But in a way, that expands out to also his energy, his Brahmajyoti energy, and the soul, which is really interesting because recently in one of the purports we were reading, it's like, I guess we did kind of come from the Brahmajyoti, but not in the sense of floating in space. We're made out of the Brahmajyoti because we're emanations from Krishna. It seemed like it said, but we came from the spiritual world, so we shouldn't fight with each other anymore because the whole expansion of the spiritual world is made with the Brahmajyoti plus individual person, so Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva in it. I run into Jiva Tattva. His energy, we're Prakriti, we're up higher Prakriti. So his energy is the Brahmajyoti. So it's very deep and very tied together, and sometimes we have fights about it because It's like a mountain. You know, one side of the mountain is abrupt and one side of the mountain is gradual. So we have wars over whether the mountain is steep or gradual. So it's like that. We should not fight with each other. We should understand that. Nobody understands the whole yet. So we should just keep reading Prabhupada's books and chanting and pondering and hearing from one another and respecting one another and growing in our realizations. So I think I'll stop there. Is there any questions or comments? Okay. Who else has that? And hands, 2 hands up over there also. No, not 2, 1.
I was thinking about saying something, but...
Oh, okay. I think I saw Krishna's hand. Yeah. And that, Prishni then Manas, and then you if you still want to say something. So Prishni, did you have your hand up? Did I see?
No.
No? Okay, I was trying to pay attention to that corner, Prishni.
Okay.
Then okay, Krishna.
Was that article called Astronomical Evidence Proves Mahabharata is a True Account of Ancient Indian History?
It could be. What's the person who posted that? Or you just found it a different way?
Yeah.
Okay. Could be. I can't remember the title. Couldn't go and check it today, so it could be. But yeah, it's all proof. And Prabhupada there was some conversation where Prabhupada was asked how by an outside person, how do you prove this is true? A scientist. The scientist said we're accustomed to theorizing and testing and improving. So how do you prove what you're saying is true? And Prabhupada was saying something way over the guy's head. He was saying, because it's in the scripture, Krishna said it, that's our proof. And that was like way over the scientist's head. So he didn't think that would be proof. But it is our proof. And the Vedic scriptures are dependable. They're scientific, they're historical, they're completely recorded and consistent. They're proof for us. And then we can take that and look like Sariputta and Michael Dhruta starting with the Bhagavatam and then looking at the scientific evidence to see how it fits into proof the Bhagavatam.
Well,
I think that Hardwani did put it in up.
Well, I just was going to say when you were talking about how, most people, they think like such and so way. I think you were talking about like the impersonal aspect. I don't think most people even think about stuff like that. I think most people are so absorbed in trying to satisfy their senses, and religion is becoming such an obscure thing that it's not even. I mean, I don't know statistically. On the other hand, they do say that. I guess because people are in such a suffering condition, they're looking. But like a lot of people, they don't sit around and think about what's what aspect of the supreme am I? Where is my allegiance? They're just like.
No, well, devotees write about different sides of things, but outside they don't think. But they're taught certain things. They're taught that God took a material body, became man in order to talk to men. They're taught that in order to teach men and suffer and die for men. He couldn't do it without taking a material body. He couldn't do it without taking the body of a man. So as if he's under the law of karma, instead of in charge of, he can forgive. So,
it's sort of was in a different frequency, but
okay.
What you were saying prior to that point was that about the scientists saying, well, prove it. Well, they have to also prove their fantasies.
Mm-hmm.
And they're actually fictional and they're quite ridiculous. Whereas this makes much more sense and sort of deductive. And also, though, from my understanding, I was with Siddhartha and Sridhar a few times when they were making presentations at Emory to these other people in the quantum physics and math department. Their argument, they would say, "Well, prove it," and then but then you could say, "Well, unprove it," because with science, you have to an experiment has to be either you can prove it, and you must also be able to not, if it's not provable. I mean, in other words, you can't just say, well, prove it. You have to be able to present both sides. This is not provable. You understand?
Yeah, you mean you have to be able to admit when you can't prove something?
Yes, right, yeah.
And they don't.
No.
They don't. They just hire somebody.
But if you're saying you have to
illustrations.
prove this, well, you have to not prove it. You have to not prove what I'm saying is true. Because the influence, and don't tell me you can't see, because you couldn't see the atom. But you knew it's there, and now they know there's so many other things other than way below.
Right.
Quarks or something, and
Right, yeah.
so many different, there's unlimited, and they don't see them, but the influence, the evidence is there. And so, the vision is not, and so they, in other words, they're saying, well, how do you know this is true? Well, how do you know it's not true?
Yeah, they can't. And all these things that they measure about the atoms, that they list all these particles and everything, when they come out, the particles are just waves anyway, so they're possibly just measuring different kinds of waves. It's all waves of Krishna's energy anyways. I mean, that is the ultimate truth, is Krishna's energy. So in there's quantum physics, they have some idea about things. Things are sometimes particles and sometimes waves, or sort of simultaneously or something. But then they have all this list of particles, but they're not saying, well, I wonder if we understand this right. Maybe we're just measuring waves different ways. Maybe it's not different particles. But they don't, and they have this redshift theory, and by this redshift of light, they somehow measure the distances of stars and galaxies as if it's a proven theory, but they can't go and check it. They can't prove that the redshift theory really tells them accurately. They just have made a whole system mapped out according to this redshift theory and the different colors of light that they can measure. So they mapped out the whole universe this way, and they could be wrong about the redshift.
And I remember growing up, there was on a regular basis, because they would say it was carbon, they knew the time frame of something based on carbon dating. And then they would all of a sudden, a few years go by and say, well, actually we realized there was a mistake in the equation. We were off by 100,000 years or 100 million years, and we have to make it. And so I would have been right in the test, and I failed the test. But no retroactive.
No.
Adjustment on my
in the grade
scores. So, but they're constantly. Their senses are imperfect. They make mistakes. They have a tendency to be an illusion. Mm-hmm. They see water where it's not, on the road in the desert, and they have a tendency to cheat.
Yes, they
and
do.
be cheated.
Yeah.
They do.
And a lot of these guys have been caught, especially in the archaeological, and when they find bones, and we find out later that they planted them and did some work on them.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
I thought they also had found discoveries in strata that we could never, according to their theories, have humans, and they find stuff in undisturbed strata.
That's where, what's his name? Zaput
and
hidden archaeology.
They really knocked them right out of the park with
These
that.
things were actually published and then suppressed.
Yeah.
And then people lost their careers,
Mm-hmm.
and just because of this, they suppressed them, people got kicked out of their careers, just to preserve the theory. That's it, just to preserve the theory of history.
And now they're finding that, like Prabhu said, they don't retroactively go back and reestablish a person's career. Now that they find out they were right.
They just say, we have a new theory, now we believe this. Then you see a headline, scientists say such and such might be the case after all, or something like that. Scientists are now saying. Scientists are talking off the top of their heads again.
But this process of knowledge is a legitimate process of receiving knowledge, descending knowledge. Mm-hmm. Everyone, I've never been to Iceland, but I've been, there are people that have been there and give me information, and they're reliable sources. So even oral history, if it's recorded later on, well, how do we know that George Washington exists, or any of these other individuals. It's been, of course, there may be some mistakes along the line, but the point is that oral history and descending knowledge is a bona fide process of knowledge.
Mm-hmm. We are taught against it. We're taught, not only are we taught that the Hindu religion just has mythology, it has no history, no science. We're taught the Vedic scriptures are just not truth or anything. We're taught, they get discredited. We're taught that we can't know about God. And we're taught from childhood. Like my brother, the Christian, told me about how he was telling a little boy, he was asking him questions. He was saying, "We don't know," as if that was some kind of profound statement. And it's not.
It's a mystery.
You don't know.
It's a
He
mystery.
said, and they call it
It's
a
mystery.
beauty,
It's
the
a mystery
beauty
to
of the
you.
mystery.
Yeah, it's a mystery. Yeah, so we're teaching people that we can't know. And even goes to the Bible, if you have knowledge, it must be from the devil, so don't get knowledge. And so they just have all these like barricades against us, that they teach people, put in their minds, barricades against the truth. And that's what we're working against when we're trying to spread this knowledge. They have barricades that they've been taught. Fear. Yeah?
I think that tree was called the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah.
Which
So
means
the
they
word
were
knowledge is in
innocent.
there, so that word knowledge is in it. Might be from the devil, so don't get knowledge.
Don't get
No,
knowledge.
it's going to be evil. They're so scary. They're taught this fear.
Well, then why am I listening to you?
Hmm?
Why am I listening to you, Mr. Scientist? If I shouldn't get knowledge so
Right.
much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
why
should
get-
follow it to the nth degree for them.
Well, there are some fundamentalists that don't want to participate in any of that either.
That's true. Only what the Bible says, and they don't understand the Bible. So, because the Bible does reflect Vedic knowledge, but it's been like shrunken and condensed in certain styles, and by this time it's kind of the original truth is lost. So you can't, it's hard to understand the Bible without some Vedic knowledge.
Lord Chaitanya used to, when he would debate with someone, he would defeat them, and then he would take their position and then defeat his
Yeah.
original.
Prabhupada did that too, I'm told.
So, every day.
Yeah. So, anything else? Thank you all for participating, and all those who showed Prabhupada, and all those who showed Bhagavatam.
Jai.